Hoops and Homers family. Hope you had a fantastic New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. I'm sure a lot of y'all got the day off. Hopefully so. If not, thank you for grinding. But okay, this is unexpected. That's the title of today's episode because there's just so much going on today's episode. So much has gone on over the last few weeks. We have to get right on into it because there's some very interesting stuff going on, especially with the Denver Nuggets. And as far as the Rockies go, not a lot happening over the New Year's Eve or even the holiday break with Christmas and such. But your boy was busy. Your boy went out and got you some primary information from a primary source, as you can see at the top of this stream, assuming you're watching this live. But let's kick it off, starting with our Denver Nuggets. Okay, so we've taken about 2 weeks off the pod now. And there were a few games that the Nuggets played beyond the games that we talked about on our last stream. Okay, so we talked about the Houston game. We talked about the Utah game. For whatever reason, I thought the Utah game was in Utah. Apparently it was here. That might have impacted my prediction a little bit on the last episode that we streamed. But oh well, we had the Utah game, we had the Dallas game, then we had the Minnesota game. Those were the 4 games that we talked about last time we streamed here on Hoops and Homers. Then we played against Orlando, Miami, Toronto, and Cleveland. So aside from the results of those games, it was about a 500-ish period of play for the Nuggets. Actually, I think they finished 3-5 in those 8 games. We'll walk through it here in a second. But obviously, the major news over the last 2 weeks has just been the injuries that have continued to plague this team. Early in the season, started off with Christian Brown. Then it became Aaron Gordon. Okay. Jamal somehow has been the healthiest of all the starters. If I had told you going into the season that a few months into the season, Jamal Murray would be the healthiest Denver Nuggets starter, you probably would have laughed me out of the room. Okay. But that's been the case. And so we had Cam Johnson get hurt against Dallas a few weeks ago. He'll be out for more than a month with a knee injury. Jonas Valanciunas got hurt against the Raptors. Leg injury. I think it was a calf strain. He'll be out for more than a month. You have Christian Brown and Aaron Gordon still out. They might be back next week, which would be a much appreciated sign for this team that they can potentially get some continuity going and build back the chemistry that has kind of been lost over the last few months since they haven't had a healthy team to play with. But obviously the most impactful of all the injuries that the Nuggets have had over the last few weeks is Nikola Jokic, our boy, who has been one of the greatest champions for being healthy and being effective and efficient night in, night out. Best player in the league, hands down. Finally has his first major injury in his playing career. And he'll be out for also more than a month with a knee injury. Thankfully, it wasn't more serious than it could have been. Got hurt in the last 5 seconds of the half against the Miami Heat in a completely inadvertent way. I think Spencer Jones stepped on his foot and that caused his knee to lock up. Terribly unfortunate situation. So with that being said, this team is a shell of its maximum potential right now. I mean, you just look across the board. You don't have 4 of your 5 starters, maybe for at least another game, maybe 2 or so more. It sounded like Alleman was optimistic that by the end of the road trip, you could get CB and AG back. But man, the play style of this team without 4 of its 5 starters, and even assuming you get Christian Brown and Aaron Gordon back, without 2 of its key starters is going to be very interesting. It'll be very interesting to see the lineups that David Adelman runs out on a night-to-night basis because he's dealing not only with a lot of younger guys, a lot of newer guys to this team, but he's also dealing with the reality that he doesn't have his 3-time MVP running the show for this team for the foreseeable future during a period of time where major seeding implications could be in the balance. Okay, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Ultimately speaking, the injuries keep stacking up. This is not a good sign for this team. Like I've said numerous times on this show, the Nuggets can win the championship this year. They will win the championship this year if they stay healthy. That's what they did in 2023. They stayed healthy. Very similar vibe I got back then after the offseason. I was like, I think this is a championship team. I think this team can win the championship this year if they stay healthy. And lo and behold, they stayed healthy for the most part. A few injuries here and there, but nothing like this. This is absolutely insane. And so they won the championship in 2023 with a healthy team. This team, in my opinion, is much better than that team when fully healthy. Best offense of all time, as we've seen so far this year. Okay. Defensively, they were a top 5 team before Christian Brown and Aaron Gordon got hurt. So this team has been putting it together on both sides of the ball when healthy. That's a championship team. Okay. The NBA season is a little bit different than the NHL season. And I say that because a few of the other guys on 5280 have been saying the Avs are actually the most likely of the 3 competitive Colorado sports teams that have the best chance at winning the championship this year. And I completely understand that. Avs have been absolutely torching the NHL. But again, that's a new thing. The Avs have been good in recent years, but they haven't been torching the NHL in this way type of good. That's a new circumstance. The Denver Nuggets have been good consistently for the last few years. They won a championship a few years ago, similar to the Avs. But the way the NBA season works, you have to balance out your guys so that they don't end up getting too burnt out for the postseason, because the NBA postseason is very, very rigorous. That's nothing taken away from the NHL, but it is to say that there are certain load management concerns that the NBA has that, as far as I'm aware, NHL does not have. And for that reason, you have that added element of, okay, the regular season is the period of time where we want to establish ourselves as legit title contenders. We want to get the best seed possible, but we're not going to just throw all of our energy into the regular season, get the top seed, and then get burnt out in the postseason and end up losing a game 7 against a really good team. And so that said, the Nuggets are going to have to find a way to balance out their rotation now that they literally don't have a choice. They're going to be missing multiple key role players for at least a month, and that will just impact the team's ability to build chemistry. But we've seen enough from them when they're healthy to the point where I'm still certain that if this team is healthy and gets enough games played together at some point during the back end of the season, maybe back end of February through March and April, that they can revitalize themselves and demonstrate and prepare themselves, more importantly, that they are going to go into the postseason as a team to be feared and ultimately show that they are the best team, all things considered, at the end of the day. But you have to be healthy for that. And so the last 2 weeks have been kind of interesting for the team. We'll start with the Houston game. Okay. I said that the Nuggets would win that game 116-101. They ended up losing that game 115-101, which is kind of funny. Look, you played that team earlier that week on Monday. You won a very close overtime game. You could completely understand how coming out on a Saturday evening, weird playing time. You don't play many Saturday afternoon games against a team that was looking to get some payback, as we kind of saw in that game when there were some issues that broke out, some arguments between Durant, Bruce Brown. You can understand how the Nuggets were not prepared to come out and win that game on Saturday afternoon. Okay. Also, Houston usually shoots 12 of 30 from the 3-point line. And in that game, they shot 19 of 35. All right. So that's an additional 21 points. And not to say that that's necessarily how that translates, but if they hadn't made as many threes as they made on that Saturday afternoon, it would have been a little bit closer. Okay. So I wasn't upset that we lost to Houston. A little bit upset that my prediction for Houston winning by 10 points on Monday ended up coming true when I predicted that the Nuggets would win on Saturday. But that loss was understandable. The Utah win, again, pretty self-explanatory also. Utah, we talked about, not a very good team, all things considered, offensively or defensively. They were coming here, and Nuggets started off that game on a 19-0 run. Okay, so the game at that point in time was effectively over. All right, even though it was the first half, even though it was the first quarter, and the Nuggets have shown the potential to blow large leads like that throughout the rest of the game, historically, it didn't happen. And it probably wasn't going to happen against a Utah team like that. I think the smallest lead the Nuggets had was in double digits. If you think about that, because they started off the game on a 19-0 run. And so that game never really got close at any point. And that's just kind of the way that Utah game went. Pretty self-explanatory. The Dallas game was a back-to-back, traveling down to Dallas on the road against a team that had just beaten you at home a few weeks earlier by 10. And that was a national TV game. So that's the game that Cam Johnson got hurt. It was a close game. I really, truly felt that the Nuggets could win that game. I think I predicted that they would win 121-118 at closest. They ended up losing by a point. Cooper Flack had an absolutely insane night that evening, though. 33, 9, and 9. That's by far the best game of his career, as far as I know, from a completeness perspective. I know he had a 40-point game at some point in there, but a near 30-point triple-double for a 19-year-old, crazy. So he hardcore carried that team in that game. Dallas also collectively was 20 of 41 from three. So you're not gonna win many games when that's the case. So that loss was also understandable. Minnesota game. That game was kind of concerning for a little bit down the stretch. I said that the Nuggets would win 115-107. That was the score at one point late in the fourth quarter. Somehow the Nuggets let that lead slip right through their fingers. Ended up winning in overtime, thankfully. Interesting game. 19 of 43 from three. So another game where the Nuggets shot the three well. And that's a theme that we'll talk about here in a second. But it seems to be that aspect of their game this year is pretty indicative of their ability to win. And so, I mean, it's also nice to have the best player in the world, right? Nikola Jokic dropping 56, 16, and 15. Absolutely crazy stat line. So it also helps to have him. But at the same time, you need a team effort. For him to get that many assists, it means that the rest of the team is getting involved and playing effectively, knocking down their shots, and taking advantage of the opportunities that he's creating for them. So really important that the whole team showed up in that game, but Joker hardcore carried, scoring more than a third of the team's points in that Christmas night win. Then the games we didn't get to talk about were the Orlando game. They flew down to Orlando, lost close to Orlando. I think it was a 1-point game. Okay. High scoring game. 11 of 29 from three in that game. And so the Nuggets did not shoot the three ball well, and they ended up paying the price for it. So again, you kind of see that theme showing up. But Anthony Black had an absolutely incredible evening. Career night, 38 points, 7 of 11 from three. All right. If you get that kind of contribution from a guy on any given evening, your team should win. Okay. So Orlando barely pulled that one out. Nuggets were up by double digits for a decent amount of time in that game too. Whatever happened, they let the lead whittle down, and they couldn't hold off the Magic, and Magic came back. Joker did have 34, 20, 21? Yeah, 21 rebounds and 12 assists in that game, though. Wasn't enough. But nonetheless, it's unfortunate to see that they couldn't hold that lead. Not really an understandable loss there in Orlando. Then Monday evening, they flew out to Miami to continue their road trip. Look, that was a game that they did not come out hot in to start. Okay, they were down pretty decently throughout most of the first half. They made a run to close the second quarter before Joker got hurt, obviously, in the last 5 seconds. No Tyler Hero in that game. And despite not having arguably their best shooter, a team in Miami that usually shoots 13 of 35 from three shot 22 of 46 from three against the Nuggets on Monday evening. Okay. So, you lose your best player going into the second half when the game was close. So it's understandable how the Heat ended up blowing the Nuggets out in this game, scoring over 140 points. By far the largest amount of points the Nuggets have given up in a regular season this year. Still, it's disappointing that Joker went into halftime leading the team in scoring, and he finished as the team's leading scorer. Not very encouraging. Okay. And then we got the news, obviously, I think the next day, that he would be out for an extended period of time. And at that point, we kind of had a few questions, right? Because we had Toronto Wednesday evening, then we had Cleveland Friday evening. How is the play style of this team going to change without him in there? And surprisingly enough, Denver flew up to Toronto, continuing the road trip, and won. They won the game, 108-106. Close game. They didn't shoot well from three, which is very interesting. But again, it was the first game without Jokic. And so you were kind of wondering if they would be able to win with a significantly different play style. The reason they are getting so many good three-point looks is because Joker is out on the court. And he's just sucking in all these defenders, 2-3 guys a lot of the time. And so without that presence out there, the defense really did need to step up. And even though Scotty Barnes had a 30-point triple-double for the Raptors, they were able to hold the Raptors overall to 106 points. That's something that's kind of taken a back seat over the last few weeks here without Christian Brown, without Aaron Gordon, is that defense. And so it was kind of encouraging on Wednesday evening to see the Nuggets hold a decent Raptors team, a pretty good Raptors team to start the year, although they're unproven, to under 110 points when they'd been consistently giving up more than 110 points for most of the last few weeks. Gave us some reason to be encouraged going into the Cleveland game last night. Although, better team, bigger team, you lost Jonas Valanciunas on Wednesday evening against the Raptors. So he got his month-plus long injury that evening. And so the Nuggets were going into Cleveland very undermanned and undersized. Okay, Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley. We don't have either of our top two centers right now. And so it's understandable that the Nuggets would have gone in as underdogs in this game, even though they had the better record. Interesting overall, though, because the Nuggets actually were up by double digits at one point in this game. The Nuggets were playing pretty solidly, all things considered. They were getting good ball movement, even without all the guys that they're missing. Jamal had 30 points, had about, I think, 26 of those in the first half. So he was carrying the team in the first half. That obviously stopped the back end of the game. Cleveland, it was a really close game from a three-point shooting perspective. Cleveland was 17 of 47, and we were 16 of 39. So, I think that was the order it was in. I believe that we were the ones that made the one fewer three in this game. Let me double check that really quickly. But either way, it was a lot more competitive than I thought it would be when I was watching that game. So to see how the Nuggets were able to go out and actually play pretty good defense again against a pretty good Cavs team. Cleveland was 16 of 39. Sorry. Denver was 17 of 47. Cleveland was 16 of 39. It was encouraging to see, nonetheless, the Nuggets go out and compete against a team like Cleveland, who was a good team last year. They're underperforming a little bit this year. And they were close. They lost by 5 points. They scored 108 points again. And so there's really not much you can say about that game from a disappointment perspective. Deron Holmes got his first official start in the NBA. Didn't play very well. But again, Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley, that's understandable. He's undersized against both of those guys, as our team was overall. So we really did need the threes to fall in that game. We made 17 of them, but very inefficiently. And so, yeah, over the last few weeks, 3-5, again, heavily injured Nuggets team. So this is not indicative of this team's ability to perform at all. In fact, I would say it's indicative of their ability to go all the way, because you have all these guys, not only second string now, you're into third string guys getting regular minutes on a night-to-night basis, and you're still competing with these teams that are pretty good, these playoff caliber teams, albeit in the Eastern Conference, and the Eastern Conference is generally weaker than the Western Conference. We'll see how the Nuggets play when they have to take on Oklahoma City, come January, February, when you have to take on the Lakers come the back end of the year, the Spurs again, undoubtedly. We'll see how the team continues to play against the top tier Western Conference teams, but it's still encouraging to see that they're playing good teams competitively, even with all these injuries. And so it really does speak to, again, the quality of the coaching that these guys are receiving and the quality of the depth that this team has that they haven't had at any point in the last few years. So all things considered, as a Nuggets fan, it's disappointing to see all these injuries. And there's definitely reason to be concerned that the team will lose some ground over the next few weeks without Jonas Valanciunas and Jokic, both without their top two centers. They'll get, like we said, they'll get Brown back. They'll get Gordon back. They also won't have Cam either. They won't have Cam Johnson. For what that's worth, he has been playing better in recent games, and he's a good defender. So he's obviously still kind of underperforming what we would have liked to get out of him. But nonetheless, it'll be very interesting to see how the Nuggets weather the next few weeks. They go as the threes go. That seems to be the case, at least when they had Jokic and we're missing a lot of the other role players around him. How that continues to evolve without Jokic will be very interesting to see, though, because the first two games that Jokic has not played, that was the Raptors game and the Cleveland game, the Nuggets played pretty decent defense and couldn't score. Right? This has been a consistent 120 plus point team per game with Jokic on the court, regardless of who's around him. But the first few games without him, under 110 points both games. Now, the defense stepped up in one of those games. Defense kind of stepped up against the Cavaliers as well. Obviously, 113 points is it's not 120. It's not upper 110s. So it looks like the team is going to have to emphasize that defense a lot more. And getting Christian Brown and Aaron Gordon back will help verify the legitimacy of that identity over the next few weeks, should that be the identity that the team wants to take on without Jokic. But we'll see how that goes. They're going to have to knock their threes down. They're going to have to create those looks. The Spencer Joneses of the world are going to have to knock their threes in. Peyton Watson is going to have to knock more of his threes in. Didn't have an incredible three-point shooting week this week, although he had multiple 20-point games. They're going to have to knock those shots down if they're going to have an opportunity here, because they're not going to create as many opportunities for themselves in the paint just because they're undersized significantly. Like against Cleveland last night, the Nuggets got out-rebounded by more than 20. And so the paint is just not going to be an area that's very clear for them without the guy who is incredible at dominating in the paint and creating drive and kick opportunities. So it'll be interesting to see how the Nuggets 3-point shooting evolves over the next few weeks without Jokic. It'll be also interesting to see if Peyton Watson can continue stepping up. He, over the last few games, has been effectively the starting unit's second option. Okay, so it's been Jamal and then him. Peyton is okay. You know, he's significantly improved from last year. He's playing with a ton of confidence. He's clearly worked on his shot. His handles, I guess, are improved from last year. He doesn't really give you the confidence that he'll go out and be like an all-star by any means, but that's not really his job. Remember, he came into this season as the backup small forward. And so now he's kind of been thrust into starting at the 2, at the 3, depending on who's healthy on any given evening. And so it'll be interesting to see how he continues to step up, because this is a contract year for him. He's going to get paid this offseason, and it's very likely that the Nuggets will not be able to pay him his market value. And so you could very well lose a Peyton Watson this offseason. So you're trying to see what you can get out of him from a productivity perspective, and he's going to take full advantage of that opportunity. He's going to make sure that, especially over these next few games where there's no Christian Brown and no Aaron Gordon, who are higher options than him offensively, that he can get his looks from 3, that he can get his opportunities to drive to the basket, maybe get a little bit of action in the mid-range. It'll be interesting to see how he continues to fit his identity into both the team's current need to succeed and his own personal ambitions to get paid this offseason by a team. So can he continue stepping up? I guess we'll see over the next few weeks, and we'll see what that role continues to look like. I think another interesting thing that we'll be tracking over the next few weeks is whether or not DaRon Holmes can earn a rotation spot. He played pretty well in his first real minutes against the Raptors on Wednesday, coming off the bench. Like we said last night, did not play well, but again, significantly oversized opponent in Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley. So that's understandable. He has a nice skill set. He's out there. He provides good energy. He's moving around. He can play good defense. He's gotten a few blocks his first few games, getting real minutes. And so there's a lot to like about DaRon Holmes. There's a reason he was a first-round pick last year. And this is a guy with a skill set that could absolutely help this team down the stretch and maybe even into the postseason. I doubt he'll get postseason minutes, but at a minimum, he could earn a rotation spot for the rest of the year. And then when that rotation gets cut down to 8 or so guys come postseason, he might be one of the first guys you call off the bench should someone go out of the game with an injury, or should you want a more 3-and-D type of power forward. If he can earn that with the opportunities he'll get over the next few months without Big Val and without Jokic. So I'll be very interested to see how Holmes does in his first real rotational minutes. I'm super excited for him and excited about what he can bring to this team. So we'll see how that whole situation continues to develop for him. Bottom line, the ultimate question that we have to ask about this team overall is, can the Nuggets weather the storm of the next few weeks and maintain a top 4 seed? Because this is what the Western Conference looks like at this point in time. Okay. Oklahoma City, still number 1. They are 30-5. San Antonio is kind of right behind them. They've already beaten the Thunder twice, by the way. So this Spurs team is not to be messed with. They're 25-9. Then you have the Houston Rockets at 21-10 in the 3rd seed. Then you have the Nuggets in 4th at 23-11. Okay. 6.5 games back of 1st, but they're only 5.5 games back of the 8th seed. And so you've got the Lakers, you got the Timberwolves, you have the Suns, all kind of within striking distance of Denver over the next few weeks from a seeding perspective. And so if we take a look at the games that the Nuggets have coming up, we'll say that by some miracle of God, the entire Nuggets team is healthy again after the All-Star break. So that puts us right around February 19th. Okay. There are a decent amount of games in between here and there. Let's just walk through them all and see what this Nuggets team as currently constructed can do in each of these games. Okay. So we have Brooklyn at Brooklyn on Sunday. Okay. Brooklyn's not good. Brooklyn is 10-22. Obviously, it's the Michael Porter Jr. revenge game. It'll be interesting to see how he plays against his former team, or the shell of his former team, I suppose. But I think since the Nuggets were able to compete against the Raptors and the Cavs, that they'll be able to beat the Nets on Sunday afternoon. Okay, so we're going to say the Nuggets will be 1-0 after the Brooklyn game. Then they go to Philadelphia Monday evening. Okay, national TV game. Tough place to play. It's always been a tough place to play for the Nuggets over the last few seasons. Not sure how healthy that Philadelphia team is, but I do know that Philadelphia is 18-14, and they're 5th in the East. Again, the Eastern Conference is generally weaker, but we'll say that's a loss. Okay, we'll say that they lose to Philadelphia. We'll say that the Nuggets also lose to Boston. Boston's 21-12. That's a good team. Okay, a non-healthy Nuggets team is not going into Boston and beating Boston in all likelihood if Boston is healthy. So that'll be 1-2. Okay, that closes off the road trip. Then they come home against Atlanta, barely beat Atlanta at Atlanta with a much healthier team. You could easily see that being a loss. So we'll say 1-3. Milwaukee's an interesting situation. Okay, that's a sub 500 team, Eastern Conference. They're 11th. Yeah, I could see the Nuggets winning that game at home. We'll give them that win just for the sake of being generous. Okay, 2-3 at New Orleans. That's a toss-up, man. I think New Orleans is actually the tied for the 3rd worst record in the league. So we'll say that's a win. So that's 3-3. At Dallas, that's a loss. 3-4. Home against Washington, we'll say that's a win. 4-4. Home against Charlotte, that's a win. 5-4. Home against the Lakers, that's a national TV game. At this point, they should have Christian Brown and Aaron Gordon back. How much that'll help them without Jokic, without Cam, without Jonas, to be determined. So we'll say that somehow the Nuggets find a way to win this game, though. We're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. The Lakers' defense is not good. So we'll say the Nuggets beat the Lakers at home on national TV at that point in time. That makes them 6-4. Yeah, 6-4. 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yeah, 6-4. Okay. At Washington, we'll say they win that one. Okay. 7-4. At Milwaukee, we'll say that's a loss. 7-5. at Memphis, 8-5. Versus Detroit, we'll say that's a loss. Detroit's been pretty good this year. 8-6. Home versus Brooklyn, 9-6. Home versus the Clippers. Clippers have been playing better recently. Will they continue to play that well about a month from now? Who knows? But we'll say that the Clippers find a way to beat us on national television. So 9-7, I believe. Oklahoma City at home, that's a loss. 9-8. At Detroit, 9-9. At New York, 9-10. At Chicago, 9-11. Home versus Cleveland, 9-12 probably. And then home against Memphis, national television. We'll say they win that one. 10-12. Okay. 10-12 over the next 22 games that you're probably, at least that we're generously saying, they're probably not going to have a fully healthy team for. And so 10-12, add that to 23-11, 33-23, they'll really only drop to about 10 games over 500. And so you could honestly see the Nuggets dropping no lower than the 5th or 6th seed over the next few weeks, that they're not going to have a good amount of their key contributors, and especially without their best player and the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic. So that's our prediction for the games up until the All-Star break. Like we said, they'll be at the Clippers after the All-Star break, February 19th. Trade deadline will have passed. That'll be something interesting to track for the Nuggets too, to see if they decide to go out and make any moves. Obviously, you have to be very careful when you're making moves to update and impact your team's chemistry. And we've seen that this team, when healthy, is arguably the best team in the league. So do you risk messing with that? Obviously, you have interesting contract situations too, with guys like Peyton Watson coming up, like we kind of mentioned. Would you be willing to trade him, given that you know you're not going to be able to afford him this offseason? Maybe go in and get a veteran guy who can play a similar position and roll for this team off the bench. Interesting things to monitor if you're the Denver Nuggets and if you're a Denver Nuggets fan over the next few months. But it's encouraging to see that the team probably won't slip very far, even though they're very, very injured, assuming they can play some sort of consistent basketball and continue getting their three-point opportunities and knocking down a good amount of those. Very interesting stuff that we'll be tracking over the next few weeks. Okay. That's all I have for the Denver Nuggets. Time to switch into baseball, though. So obviously, as fans, we like watching the game from a fan perspective. I know, who'd have thunk? But oftentimes it's good to just get the behind the scenes perspective, right? It's always good for us as fans to realize that the game of baseball is much more than just what we see on the field. And it's much more than all the drama that we know about or hear about off the field. These are players with individual lives. They're working on not only becoming good players, but just justifying the fact that they've finally gotten the opportunity to achieve their dream of making it to the major league level. Massive accomplishment. And so here on Hoops and Homers, I'm doing my best to reach out to guys around the league and get you guys firsthand experiences so you can get to appreciate what these guys are doing behind the scenes, off the field, on the field, personal lives, etc. And so this week, last week, I suppose, is when we talked. Last week, I got the opportunity to sit down with Colorado Rockies catcher Braxton Fulford. Obviously, he made his debut in 2025 for the team. And there were a few things I wanted to pick his brain on. He had a very interesting rookie season, and he was one of the first guys I reached out to for a discussion. But here's the interview or the discussion that I had with Braxton. So I hope you guys enjoy this little 20-minute interview that I had with a guy who I think has an interesting skill set, like I've talked about for a few weeks when talking about the Rockies roster construction, and kind of get his perspective on how he feels he can contribute to the team going forward and some of the lessons he learned from the 2025 season. So here you go. I hope you guys enjoy. Braxton Fulford, welcome to Hoops and Homers. You're the very first guest we've had on this show. Appreciate you for coming on. How's it going?
Yeah, let's go. Thanks for having me. I'm good.
Yeah. Holiday season going well. It's kind of that time of the year where things are winding down, but they're about to start building up. You do anything fun?
A lot of family time. All my nephews are in town, so I've been playing a lot of Nerf gun wars and whatever else. visiting family in Dallas. But yeah, it all comes with the season, About to start getting ready to go again, lifting a lot heavier, a lot more baseball specific work. So it's coming up quick.
I know, man, for sure. It's what are we now? Less than 2 months away from pitchers and catchers. It's crazy. Time just flies. Offseason flies too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm heading out to Arizona in less than a month now, so it's even quicker for me.
Yeah, right. Tight turnaround. But I'm sure it was good to get some rest in before getting back into things. Speaking of getting back into things, I'm not sure how much of Colorado Rockies Nation knows much about you. You got about 40 games under your belt last year with the team. First time getting called up to the big leagues. Congratulations on that. I was excited to see that. I was tuning into that game. I think you made your debut against the Dodgers, and I was like, oh, interesting. This guy, Braxton Fulford, he's been exciting. Can't wait to see this game tonight. But aside from that, Rockies fans probably don't know a ton about you or your play style unless they're super involved with some of the minor league stuff that the Rockies have going throughout the organization. But if you were to summarize your play style, just generally speaking, how would you describe that behind the dish?
Yeah, I think I've been a very athletic, very defensive catcher early on in college, and then especially at certain times in my minor league career, defense has carried me. Good arm to control the running game, receive well. I take pride in pretty much all the things that come with catching. Hitting has been great at times. Other times it's been slow, but I think that's kind of the beauty of the catching position. There's a whole lot you can bring to the table, and I believe I can do every aspect of the game that a catcher is asked to do. But I think in the past, a lot of it has been my catching ability that has allowed me to play at different levels. I remember my freshman year at Texas Tech, I hit, I think, like 170 for the season. I was kind of playing every second, third game early in the season, and then halfway through, I was the starter on a team that went to the College World Series, primarily because I was a good catcher, because I could control the running game. I communicated well with the pitchers. So, I didn't produce offensively that season, but because I was able to contribute behind the plate, it kind of carried me. And that's just kind of how it goes. Sometimes you're going to not be feeling it at the plate, and you got to find other ways to contribute to the team. And I've done that, and I've been able to make adjustments with the bat as well. Some seasons are slower than others, but then other seasons I'm hitting in the middle of the lineup, slugging, doing everything you want a catcher to do. So I think for me, it's been largely defense, which I believe your catchers should be focusing on, but the offense isn't lacking either.
Yeah, that's good to see. And that was probably my personal favorite part of watching you play last year. Super active behind the plate. I noticed that in the starts you got last year. An underrated aspect of your game is your speed, I suppose. You were like 90 or high 80 percentile in sprint speed, which is obviously unique for a catcher. How do you see that sort of fitting into your gameplay on the field?
Yeah, I think it's something that we discussed last season, actually. The potential for me to be able to steal bases, especially if I'm catching every third, fourth day, if Hunter's in there, I'm going to be fresh. So I think it's an aspect of the game that we need to bring. Me taking bags can really, change the things for the team, put me in scoring position so others can drive me in. And it's something that could be overlooked just because I am a catcher, but I am fast, especially for a catcher. So I think it's something that we need to use, and I think we will use.
Yeah, hopefully so. That's something we talked about on last week's episode, actually. This team, the last time they were competitive in 2018, they were eighth in the league in stolen bases. Last year, 23rd I believe. So it's good to hear that that is something that the team is emphasizing going into 2026 during this particular period that they're in as an overall organization. But like I said a little bit earlier, major debut in 2025. There's so much said about the difference between AAA to the majors. For you specifically, what was the largest difference between Albuquerque and Coors Field and going on the road to play other MLB teams at the MLB level?
Honestly, for me, it was kind of just me achieving a dream that I wanted to achieve. I don't know if you watched early on those first few games that I played, there was a lot of just, there's a lot of play that wasn't at the major league level. I made errors. My first game, I was over 4 with 4 strikeouts. And so I think for me, I put a lot of pressure on myself because I was playing at the big league level. Like, I have to do well or whatever it is. I'm playing against Otani. And I think I needed to realize that it is the same game. There is a lot of difference from AAA to the big leagues. I would say the biggest difference is that guys are a lot more consistent in the big leagues. You see really good arms, really good hitters in the minor leagues, but it's not 1 through 9 in the lineup. It's not every arm coming out of the pen. So that's the biggest difference. And then, also you're playing on the biggest baseball stage in the world. So that is something that, doesn't need to be overlooked. A lot of these guys, including me, we've worked our whole life to be playing on this stage, and you can't make it out to be bigger than it is. It's the same game. These guys work, show up, and lace it up every day, just like I do. So I think those two things were probably the biggest difference.
Yeah, that's so true. Making sure that you're not putting that extra pressure on yourself just because you've gotten that bump to the next level, right? I can't imagine literally because I've never played at the big league level, but I'm sure that there is that pressure that just obviously comes from being in that new environment, realizing that you've achieved a dream you've worked an awful long time to achieve. So it's good to hear that that's a perspective and takeaway that you had from that first time promotion that you had last season. I think that's a good sign to see in this team going forward. Like I've said, I'm more optimistic about this team's future than a lot of other Rockies fans are. And so I like to really get into mindset and stuff like that. See, are guys actually learning some of these lessons? Are they encouraged about their own optimism for performance in the future, et cetera? So that's really good to hear. I'm super glad to hear that. After the season, obviously, played about 40 games. You just noted some of that adjustments that it took for you once you got to the big league level for the first time. Were there any specific technical adjustments that you wanted to make going into this offseason based on your 2025 performance?
Yeah, I will say during the season I had some ups and some downs, but I saw that I have plenty of ability to play at the level, at the MLB level. I think the biggest adjustment was that, you face a lot of good pitching, a lot of consistent good pitching, and I had kind of tailored my swing to um, more of the verti pitcher because I was seeing a lot of these guys that are throwing these fastballs that just kind of carry. And the adjustment that I needed to make was getting my swing back to a more neutral plane. After the season, I was kind of only really tailoring my swing to a certain type of pitcher, and it was giving me a little bit of trouble at the end of the season. But that's kind of how it goes. Also, the season's so long. Um, you're gonna go through these ebbs and flows of where you're at. And I found myself at the end of the season in a little bit of a more, I guess, tall posture with my swing. So that's one thing that I'm working on. Getting back to a more neutral position, a more adjustable position. Um, and then, with the catching side of things, there's improvement always that can be done there, continuing to work on receiving. Next year is going to be interesting because they have the automatic balls and strikes system. So hitters are going to be able to challenge pitches, and catchers aren't going to be able to impact the game with the receiving quite as much. But I don't think it's gonna be taken out of the game. at all. I think catchers are still going to impact the game in a large way. So continuing to work on that receiving stuff, keeping the arm strong, but just some small adjustments, kind of looking at the data from last year, looking at what I did well, what I did poorly, and why I did good or bad. That's kind of what I've been doing with my coaches and my hitting coaches, looking at things that I can improve.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you note the automated ball strike system that's coming in 2026. I guess that's a fun question I hadn't really thought about. Personally, are you a fan of it? I know you're a defensive guy. You love the defensive aspect of catching, but are you more in favor of that type of system, or do you prefer the traditional system where umpires get to umpire freely?
Um, I mean, personally, I don't like it as a catcher for the receiving. I want to be able to steal as many strikes and get that WAR as high as possible with the receiving. But I do think it's good for the game. I really do. It's just a little check on the umpires because there's days when the umpires are their zones shifted, outside of the zone, and us as catchers and pitchers, we can exploit that on the other hitters, and you don't want to be in that position as a hitter. And then on the flip side of that, as a catcher, like if they're not giving me a part of the zone, it allows me to check them. It's a little check and balance system. I think it's going to be good. It is two challenges, and you'll see, at least in AAA, they can be used early in the game, and then they're a complete non-factor moving forward. Or the hitters are dialed into the zone, and they're really keeping the umpire in check. So I think it's going to allow the game to be a little more fair because these umpires are really good at their job, and they know the zone, but that doesn't mean they're perfect. There's pretty uh some pretty bad calls still. So I think it'll be good.
Yeah. Yeah. I noted that a few times watching some games last year. And it especially hurts a younger team, right? That's still getting a feel for the major league level. And it's like there were so many times where some of our younger guys got good at bats. And then there was just that one pitch where it's like, oh, that's off the plate. If there was a challenge system, that would have been a challengeable pitch, man. So yeah, I completely agree on the benefit that that system will bring in 2026. But that's good to hear your perspective on it as a catcher, obviously. You noted something briefly. That's another thing I noted based on what you just said a little while ago. The ride for fastballs. We're a super data analytics driven show here, at least on Hoops and Homers. And at altitude, fastballs can lose up to 3 inches of vertical ride or rise. Is that something you felt a ton of in playing games at both Coors Field and away from Coors Field? I guess you did something similar at Albuquerque too. Is that difference in ride between altitudes noticeable for hitters, at least for you?
Yeah, it is noticeable, especially with the breaking balls. They don't break nearly as much. But it's interesting because you lose that induced break, so the breaking ball doesn't drop as much, and the fastball might not ride as much. But the air's thinner, so the ball also doesn't slow down as much. So it's weird. You'll see a lot of guys swing under a breaking ball, or like get jammed, like the ball gets super deep on them because the ball doesn't break. So the breaking ball might back up when you noticed it or you recognized it early, you saw it and you swung right where you believe the ball should be. But because of the lack of air density, the ball just kind of doesn't do what it should normally do. So it's a very interesting environment to hit in and pitch in because the ball isn't as predictable. The breaking balls don't really break as much. Fastballs don't ride as much. But at the same time, the fastballs get to the plate quicker, and off-speed pitches behave unpredictably at times. So there's a whole lot that goes into it that other teams don't have to deal with, and other hitters don't have to deal with consistently. So it's a very unique environment for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because you see this stuff from our perspective as data analytics driven fans on on different websites that break this stuff down, but it's also interesting to get the side of it too. Are we just talking about statistics here, or is this something that's actually felt significantly in game? So that's very interesting perspective that you have there. As far as off-season goes, you know what you're working on specifically. What does a typical off-season plan for you look like? I know you mentioned some weightlifting and getting back into a greater workload with that. Is there anything else besides just cage work and defensive work that you get done during the off-season?
Yeah, well, early October, I usually take about 2 weeks off. And when I say off, I mean I'm usually doing some type of yoga, um, low intensity, low stress work, and then I'll gradually get into the weight room for a little bit, probably about a month of some good weightlifting, addressing different deficiencies or tight hips, whatever it may be, and then I'll start working in the baseball stuff, late November. And right now I'm kind of 50-50 with my attention, weight room to baseball stuff. Just feeling it out, like I said, there's different things that I recognized during the season that I did poorly, or understanding why I did something well and continuing that. And then each day kind of noticing how I'm feeling, and it's just kind of a day by day thing, Are my hips tight today? Do I need to do more work there? How's my arm feeling? Does my swing feel like it's in a good place? Do I need to work on hitting some righty breaking balls? So there's a basic plan that I do follow. But then it's also just listening to my body, talking to hitting coaches, and making little adjustments there. Um, yeah, I do a lot of video of myself receiving, trying to smooth that up and be the best I can back there too.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm sure after the long season, managing that off-season routine is very important, right? Because especially anticipating another long season coming up, you don't want to do too much to the point where you're burnt out going into spring training and into the regular season. So it's good to hear that you've got some good balance with that off-season workout plan. Final thing I wanted to touch on today. Going into 2026, obviously new leadership, a lot of new guys on this team. I think almost half of the guys who played a game for this team in 2025 are not returning. A lot of change going into 2026. And obviously that starts with culture. I know Warren has mentioned wanting to build a new culture that can build this team towards a winning club sooner than not. What do you personally want to contribute to the team's cultural revitalization from a positivity perspective? What do you want to contribute to the team in that regard?
Well, I think there's a lot of youth, there's a lot of newness. I think that's going to bring a lot of excitement, and I think that's good. I think that can be used in a very positive way. So, bring that excitement, get ready to go to work. I think I really resonate with the type of, culture and mentality that Schaefer has. He's a very disciplined person, and he loves some hard-nosed baseball. He loves when his guys play hard, and that's exactly what I've been raised and how I've been raised to play the game. So, that a mixture of that excitement along with, showing up every day, putting in your work, taking that 1% better mentality, and just going out there and playing hard, playing aggressive, not being afraid to fail. I think that kind of culture, that kind of mentality, we're not going to bow down to anybody. We're going to show up every day and punch the other team in the mouth. I think that's what I want to bring to the table. I want to encourage my teammates to do, and the kind of culture that I want to be a part of.
That's good stuff, man. Yeah. I mean, there were some significant steps taken forward as the year went on last year. I was super encouraged to see that. And going into 2026, obviously with a young team, that's going to be super crucial. And so I'm looking super forward to watching this team take those steps forward in 2026. That's something we've harped on this show a while now, is this idea that these steps forward are what build a team from its current position into what we eventually want to be, obviously, which is championship contenders. And so it's good to see that one step at a time, one step forward at a time approach is something that you want to instill in this team. I'm looking very forward to seeing how that plays out in 2026. Braxton Fulford, thank you for joining us on Hoops and Homers. Have a fantastic rest of your holiday season and new year. Hopefully we'll talk soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
How about that? Isn't that just incredible? Isn't that tons of fun? I mean, like I said, it's really cool as fans to dig into all of these analytics and stuff and to see how, especially as baseball fans at altitude, the pitch types are impacted both for us because we have to deal with the home road swing, and for people who are coming here understanding that there are 3 games of the year maybe to come and just have an absolute party offensively. It's really cool to get the firsthand account of how guys who are dealing with these conditions actually process a lot of these stats on the ground. So major thanks to Braxton for hopping on with us again. Hopefully we can get some more firsthand perspectives. But a few things I liked about what he said. He sees himself as a game-changing, defensive-minded catcher. We've talked about this before. Obviously, Hunter Goodman is an offensive-oriented catcher. Okay, Silver Slugger Award winner last year. And so every good team has to have that good balance between the offensive catcher and the defensive-minded catcher. Hunter obviously is the offensive-minded guy. We'd love for him to develop an amazing defensive game. If he did, he'd be one of the best all-around catchers in the entire league. But at a minimum, to know that we have the offensive side of that position locked down, and to have a guy like Braxton who will be competing for that backup catching spot this season, emphasizing the defensive side as well, working with pitchers, being active behind the dish, trying to keep the running game of our opponents at bay. It's super encouraging as Rockies fans to know that we have that balance, which every good team ultimately needs. So that's the first thing that he said that I really appreciated. The second thing is that 1% better mentality. You know, it's so important for us as fans to realize where this team is at. They delayed a rebuild. This is a rebuild that should have happened in the early 2020s, got pushed back a few years to the mid 2020s. And so we can look at the record all we want and say, okay, that's the worst team in franchise history. That's a team that barely won 40 games. Okay. We can look at that without any other context and say, okay, this is a really bad team, really bad situation. Got to get rid of all the guys and just start fresh. But if you zoom out and you realize, well, this is one of the youngest, if not the youngest team in all of MLB that we saw last season. It's a team that, based on that reality, struck out a lot, walked a lot, because a lot of these top prospects and just prospects in general that were called up throughout the organization were making their debut and struggling and focusing on how to succeed at the MLB level for the first time. All of that makes sense. But at the end of the day, like I said, we saw this team take steps forward the second half of the year. They were in a lot more games. They were walking more than they were to start the year. These young guys are getting a feel for how to play the game at the major league level. And so if they're getting better just 1% day by day, that'll take time. But it's a time process that we should, as fans, be willing to be patient for, because there's a lot of optimism. We walked through the roster a few weeks ago, the 40-man roster. A lot of interesting skill sets that this team has. Braxton has a few of them. Okay. Speed catcher, you don't see that often. So we have to be willing to give the process time to develop. And that 1% better mentality is something that I like that he will try and instill in this team's culture, because building sustainable success takes time. This is a great opportunity to start that. And so I'm super happy that he mentioned that. And then the last takeaway I had was this sort of confidence, this aggression, this lack of fear that he wants to bring to this team as they go out next year, undoubtedly being very underestimated by a lot of teams, a lot of executives, a lot of fans because of their performance in 2025. You really want this team to come out and be able to shock people. Is that something that you expect immediately? Do you expect this team to become one of the best teams in the league? No, absolutely not. But you do like to hear that that is their perspective. They want to be a team that reminisces, or that makes us as fans rather reminisce about periods of time like the Blake Street Bomber era, right? If you were to think years and years ago, even more recently as the late 2010s, when you had Nolan Arenado, Trevor Story, Charlie Blackmon, hitting 30 home runs a season. Had guys like Kyle Freeland and German Marquez in the rotation, showing up and showing out, relatively speaking, at that point in their career as younger pitchers. Then you had a bullpen that was able to come in and lock down the game. That is the type of team that we want here. We want a power team offensively from a pitching perspective all around, and a team that can just come and knock the opponent on their rear end, let's say. And so it's great to see that Braxton comes with that sort of approach. We don't want to see this team lose games in a timid way in 2026. We want them to go down swinging, but we also want them to take that next step going forward so they can learn to balance their aggression and be more information minded, go into games better prepared, which is something that the new leadership team and front office and coaching staff are emphasizing. And so it'll be good to see how this extra information, this greater focus on analytics impacts these guys in 2026. Information is power, as it's been said before. And so we love that guys like Braxton are bringing this aggression, no fear mentality to the team going forward. But once again, we thank Braxton for hopping on Hoops and Homers. I don't see any comments in our comments section on either Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube. So thank you to everyone who listened to this episode today. It's good to be back with you guys in the new year, and we'll catch up again next week. We've got a lot of fun stuff to be tracking. Might have some more gifts and surprises for you next week as well on the stream. So hopefully you tune back in at that point in time. But thank you for listening today. Have a fantastic week. We'll see y'all next Saturday.